afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. The title of today's show is The Cost of Symbols of Love, and that's an abbreviated version of the title we had picked originally, which was How Do I Love Thee? The Health, Environmental, and Human Rights Costs of Symbols of Love. My guest tonight, Dr. Martin Donohoe, he is going to talk about those kinds of things, and I should read it again to be sure that we know what we're talking about. How do I love thee? The health, environmental, and human rights costs of symbols of love. Now, Martin, and I've gotten permission to call him Martin, has been on my show a number of times in the past, and he'll be on again a number of times in the future because not only is he brilliant about medicine and all sorts of other things, but he's also a nice, friendly guy. And you can just feel his vibes.
That sounds like one of those gun-to-the-head introductions. Okay, thank you.
How are you feeling right now?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there'd be another guest here, but she's kind of misbehaving, so we don't have her in the studio with us.
My life took a dramatic change 3 months ago when I became the single father to a newborn baby girl.
3 months ago.
Yeah, so she is just the delight, and she's everything to me. And Pat, your wife, is out taking care of her right now, for which I'm very grateful. So if I yawn, it's unintentional. It's just it's a consequence of my constant sleep deprivation. And it's kind of like being on call as a doctor, but being on call every night.
24/7.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. It's the same kind of issues I deal with when I'm on call. It's fluid balance and intake and output and altered sensorium, and so it's not all that different. Although she smiles a lot more than most of my patients do. So.
And she's adorable. She's
she's
adorable.
Great.
Yeah. So we may hear the door to the studio is closed, so we can't hear her. I may crack the door open a little later on just so the audience can hear her say something.
Sure, yeah. She'll make her TV debut.
TV debut. Well, anyhow, we're going to talk about those kinds of things, and I've got a bit of a cheat sheet here that you gave me some idea of what you'll be talking about, and you've got some slides that we're going to show at the end of our discussion that will illustrate what you've talked about so far. But we'll follow the traditional format where the first part of the show will be who you are personally, and you've been on so many times, but I'm sure there will be new viewers who haven't seen you before. So we'll get some information about you personally, and then we'll go into the second part of the show, which may be 30 minutes or whatever's left, to talk about these things to do with the costs of symbols of love.
Yeah. And maybe a little more than 30, since we have 3 symbols to cover, and the litany of how do I love thee points is quite depressing and long.
Depressing, huh? Thanks for the warning.
Yeah, well, lest I be seen as a non-romantic, I actually think I am fairly romantic, but the symbols that we're going to talk about today, floriculture, diamonds, and gold, are associated with tremendous environmental and health and human rights consequences. And I got into this subject about 7 years ago when I wrote an article for Health and Human Rights, which you can look up on my website. But I became aware of really how, especially the diamond engagement ring and the gold wedding band, are just advertising constructs that we've come to believe are an expectation of showing your love. And I found it very ironic that something that is one of the greatest and deepest human emotions, one of the things that makes it worth living, is associated with these overt symbols of death.
So the costs, who pays the costs?
Well, women, indigenous peoples, our planet, all those who labor in a casino economy, all those who live primarily in poor countries, because most of the profits that are gained from gold and diamond mining, for instance, in floriculture, are not reinvested in local communities, but flow to middlemen and to large multinational corporations and their shareholders.
Well, don't large multinational corporations deserve to make a profit? I couldn't keep a straight face with that one.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised you would ask that question. Well, that's a topic for a whole other session. But I think that there's something about profit versus egregious profit, and I think the question is, do the profits of the labor flow to those that are performing the labor, or do they flow primarily to those who are sitting pushing paper in offices? And then finally, if you're going to make money off of a product, you don't want it to be something like tobacco, which I liken this to, that's associated with death. And basically the purpose of your company is to sell something that is a symbol of death. I can't look at a diamond ring now without thinking of the victims of the machete attacks in Sierra Leone and all the little kids who were amputated because of diamonds.
We're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
My gosh. So shall we talk about who you are personally
Sure.
for a bit? Yeah.
Sure.
And Martin, no middle name?
Thomas.
Martin Thomas Donohoe. Did we talk about significance of your name, any part of it?
It's Donohoe, which is the Irish Gaelic pronunciation, and my father's Australian, going back, ironically, to the Second Fleet. I wish I could say that they were prisoners, but the person was a navigator on Cook's second journey to Australia. And then my mom is Ukrainian, raised in Canada, and they met in the U.S., and so I'm an anchor baby.
So I keep learning new stuff from you. I don't think you said that before.
Yeah, I was born here, which gave me U.S. citizenship, and then because of that fortunate parentage, I have Australian and Canadian citizenship also.
You have all three now?
Yeah.
Boy, gosh darn it, terrific, yeah. You ever think about retiring to one of those other countries?
Those are actually wonderful places. I've visited both many times. I have family in both countries. The pace of life is very different. The way social services are organized is very different. Unfortunately, their policies with respect to the environment and with respect to war and conflict is not dramatically different from that of the United States. They lack the financial resources to carry out large-scale military missions that the United States has, but they've been collaborators in many of the conflicts that we have involved ourselves in, and there's obviously, that's a whole other, again, topic for discussion is
we always have that another topic for discussion.
Yeah, but I've thought of it, and the thing is that Australia is just so far away. And my family at one point owned an entire suburb of Sydney, where Sydney University is, and over many generations it's gotten whittled down now to one property. So,
you want to make a profit.
I guess if we were to go back, yeah, there's some, I come in some sense from landed gentry on that side.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So when were you born?
April 27, 1963.
63, just a youngster yet.
Yeah, 50, yeah.
You ready for your trick question?
Sure.
I've asked you before, I think. Why were you born?
Well, because my parents had unprotected intercourse.
I didn't expect that. Oh my God, you're a physician. And a straight talking physician.
Yeah, I think I'd like to think that I was born out of the deep love and respect that my parents had for each other, and I know I was, but they've also told me that I was an accident like my two brothers, so a welcome accident. But
your two brothers, and what are they about?
Yeah, so my brother Patrick lives in LA with his wife Michelle, and they have two kids, my nephews Ben and Aiden. And Pat's a Harvard MBA type who's the CEO of a skincare company. Great dad, great mom. Really, I look to them for advice on how to raise Madeline. And then I also look to the wisdom and advice of my brother Paul, who lives locally, who's a screenwriter / high school teacher, teaches high school English, and his wife Holly, who works for Travel Oregon. And their kids are my niece Paris and my nephew Emerson. So these are all cousins of Madeline's that I'm hoping will have a really positive influence on her as she grows up.
So you're a single parent. Is there anything worth mentioning about the fact that you're a single parent with a baby?
Well, it's a long story that I probably would require about a 10-minute explanation, but just it's the joy of my life. I'd like to meet a partner. I'd like to ideally give Madeline a sibling. I grew up with 2 brothers and we were very close. If it happens, great. If it doesn't happen, then it'll be Madeline and I navigating this world. But hopefully I'll meet somebody to give Madeline a mom.
He means it. You ladies out there, did you hear what he said?
Yeah, this is my personal ad. all you insomniacs, if you're watching the 3 a.m. version of this, this is what you get. Yeah.
Yeah. And any comment about you mentioned a bit about your cultural heritage and where your folks were from, so we don't need to go there. And we know you're an MD in other education, and you're still working in, what else are you doing besides doctoring in your time, besides taking care of Madeline?
Sure. And that's a full-time job. I have such respect for parents, and particularly stay-at-home moms, because it's moms that do the bulk of childcare still in this country. And I knew what I was getting into to some degree, but it's a lot of work. It's attending to the baby's needs, but also cleaning the house and laundry and so on. And fortunately, my family is helping my mom, who's 82, who is amazing. She has been a huge help, and she and Madeline adore each other. They have this real simpatico
They do? At this tender age, you can tell, huh?
Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful?
But what else I do is I'm a writer. I had a book come out just this last year, Public Health and Social Justice, which is right here. It's from Josie Bass Wiley, and you can buy it on Amazon, Powell's, through my website. It's no extra profit to me. Trust me, I'm not making any money on this book.
So what's it about?
Well, it stems from my realization over the course of my career that, and I hate to sound nihilistic, but much of what I do at the bedside, outside of the human contact, doesn't make a huge amount of difference in terms of saving lives. And that it's really the social, the cultural, the economic, and the environmental contributors to health. And so I'd written a bunch of articles over the years and taken many of those, as well as those from people that I admire, and put them into this collection where there's chapters on reproductive health care, where there's chapters on food and tobacco and environmental health and food safety, genetically modified crops, agricultural antibiotics, human rights, indigenous populations. And it's really my manifesto of how public health has tremendous power when used wisely to really affect our quantity, but more importantly, the quality of our lives, not just here in the United States, but worldwide.
Through your relationship with your patients.
Well, not just that. This is a book that anyone, really an intelligent high school student on up, could read this. There's not a lot of technical jargon because many of the pieces were written for lay journals. And so it really talks not only about what we can do as individuals to make our own lives healthier and to make healthier choices, but how we can work through our elected officials, how we can work through non-governmental organizations, through our schools, through our churches, and other ways to bring good health to many more people than have it now, because as I'm sure you know, there are many in the United States, and particularly in the developing world, who lack access to the simplest things that are the fundamental basis of just getting by day to day: food, sanitation, clean water, so on.
In the future, we'll talk about your personal appreciation of your varied patients through the years. I'm sure there's one here or there you have some special memories of your relationship with him or her.
There have been lots, and in fact my background during medical school, I studied medical humanities, which is also known as literature and medicine, and it's looking at works not just by physician authors but non-physician authors about the doctor-patient relationship, so poetry, short stories, novels, what they can tell us and what they can teach medical students and other trainees about it. And for me, every patient I see, their life is a story, and I'm a co-reader along with them of that story. And I love books, so patients to me are like books. And I feel privileged that I can help the authors of those books, the patients, to write a chapter, and hopefully want to help them write one of the better chapters in their books.
Your metaphors are terrific. Yeah. So let's see. And political persuasion. Some people don't like that. If I ask about their political persuasion, they say, well, I'm neither left nor right, but it depends on what you're talking about. But for myself, I'm a progressive, liberal, leftist, and liberal is a good term to me, and I'm concerned primarily with social concerns, and particularly my own social welfare too. So I don't see that as a label, and you may say it's a label. Do you have a description of yourself on that continuum?
I would describe myself similarly. If I identify most with the platform of the Green Party, and that's their candidates are the ones for whom I tend to vote.
You're radical.
I guess I'm a radical in a blazer, and
Stop playing with your mic.
yeah, I look like I just walked out of a Heritage Foundation conference. But
We'll forgive you for that.
yeah, if I grew a ponytail, maybe that would maybe that would convince you more.
No, don't.
Yeah, I'll wear a hemp sweater next time.
So, other than professional organizations that you belong to, any other organizations come to mind that you care to mention to the viewers that you belong to?
Well, I'm active with Physicians for Social Responsibility, including the Oregon chapter, and we're always looking for new members. You do not have to be a physician. You just have to believe in peace and an end to militarism and war and the protection of human health and the environment. And one of the main campaigns that we've been working on, which we've talked about on your show, is trying to keep coal exports from the Powder River Basin from being transmitted through the Pacific Northwest to Asia, where it's global warming, mercury exposure, et cetera. And so we're working hard to combat the corporations that are trying to do that and to befoul our local communities as well as the planet.
Yeah, and I'm a member too, and I'm just a clinical psychologist rather than an MD. So
I wouldn't say just, yeah.
Anyhow, moving right along here.
It's different skill sets, yeah.
Yeah. It's persons from the past that you liked or admired, or any people alive today that you particularly look up to. Any names come to mind?
Well, yeah, everyone in my family pretty much. I come from a very close family, and I idolized my mom, and I idolized my dad. The many years of self-sacrifice, of devotion to trying to give us a better life, and their parents before them. I'd say outside of them, people I've respected and admired include Carl Sagan, Barbara Ehrenreich, Noam Chomsky, Howard Zinn.
Your credentials are impeccable.
That's who I'd want to have over at a dinner party.
Dinner party. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how do you see the mainstream media? Is it left, center, or right, generally speaking?
It's irresponsible. I think there's not much that's left of what I would call quality journalism in this country, where the hard questions are asked of those in power. There's not much investigative reporting, whether you're listening to news that comes from a more left-wing perspective from MSNBC, where granted there is a little more investigating. I really admire Rachel Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell, and the more centrist CNN. You get minimal questioning, and yet there's hours a day just going over the minutiae of some of these fantastical trials that are important in their social implications, but not much analysis of the facts and the science behind an issue, but more of an analysis of what an issue might mean politically. And then, of course, Fox News, they just lie. And I know this because of some of the areas where I have some quasi-expertise and look at the original studies. And watching The Daily Show now is almost like a nightly fact check on Fox News with clips from the news and clips from the actual press conference or citations from the paper. So I would not even call that journalism. I would just call it a propaganda machine. But I think some of the periodicals that I admire are Mother Jones and Harper's, because that's where real journalism still exists to some degree. Fair Warning, ProPublica rather.
Don't scoot over to the left on your chair because you're going to fall off the left end.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who are more left than I am. Yeah.
What's most important nowadays to pay attention to, of all the many things that need attention paid to them? Name a couple of things that are most important nowadays.
Ridding the planet of nuclear weapons, because a nuclear war, even a limited nuclear war, would render everything that we're going to discuss tonight and most of the social and environmental campaigns meaningless if we blow up the planet, or if we damage it to a certain degree and cause widespread famine, disease, collapse of the healthcare infrastructure, and that would lead to multiple wars planet-wide, nuclear winter, and so on. So that's the most important. After that, climate change and its implications for world peace as well as world hunger and transmission of infectious diseases. And beyond that, I'm passionate about the GMO issues. I think that the major agribusiness corporations are conducting a uncontrolled, unconsented experiment on people having introduced genetically modified crops. And it's hard to put that genie back in the bottle. It's possible, but we can talk about that on another program. But I basically abide by the precautionary principle, which says first do no harm. And in the absence of complete knowledge about a subject, if there's enough information to raise concern, and there is with genetically modified crops, then you need to have a democratic discussion about the risks and the benefits of that technology and whether or not it should be rolled out and to what extent. And agribusiness will say, well, we're making drought-resistant crops and we're curing vitamin deficiencies, but the reality is that's not what the crops do. They're by and large resistant to pesticides, which are made by the exact same companies which are making the seeds. So it's a great way to make money on both ends. It's as someone once said, it's like the veterinarian who also is the taxidermist. Either way, you get your dog back.
I don't know if I'm going to talk to you anymore. So I've got this question lurking in the back of my head, and I know we've passed it, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. You're talking about a nuclear conflagration, nuclear war. I remember not too many years ago there was a countdown clock. How many minutes are we away from midnight?
Yeah, the doomsday clock has sat
you.
anywhere between 6 and I think 3 minutes to midnight. I think it's around 5 minutes to midnight now, which is a little just too close for comfort for me.
Yeah, it's even hard to allow myself to dwell on that. So instead, we will then move along and see if we can take a break for a few minutes, because then we will have just barely enough time to cover a tiny bit of the topics you propose to talk about. Shall we take a break, Mr. Director? back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. And tonight, Dr. Martin Donohoe is a friend of mine. He's been a guest a lot of times in the past, and he's been so fun and exciting to hang out with until I've had him back again. I'm going to have him back again in the future. So thanks again for coming on. I'm enjoying myself so far.
Yeah, me too.
So let's talk about the title of the show. How do I love the health, environmental, and human rights costs of symbols of love? And you mentioned flowers, diamonds, and gold, and these are symbols of love, right?
Right.
So which of those shall we talk about, or all of them at once?
Yeah, or we could start with flowers, and they've long been symbols that are given to express one's love. Valentine's Day and Mother's Day, of course, are the big days, and it's a $30 billion industry that employs about 200,000 workers, and about a third of the cut flowers that are sold in the United States are produced domestically, mostly in California, but about a half come from just two countries, Colombia and Ecuador. And the situation is pretty dire in terms of how those flowers are raised. They're raised predominantly in greenhouses where workers are prohibited from unionizing, where they work long days with minimal bathroom breaks, which is hard for women.
It's Ecuador, and what was the other country?
Colombia.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the people who are, say, pulling the thorns off the roses can get repetitive stress injuries and cellulitis or skin infections, neuropathies, as I said, minimal bathroom breaks, which leads to bladder infections, particularly in women, lots of exposure to pesticides. In fact, there are many pesticides that are used in those countries that are illegal in the United States, but they're made by companies that just ship the pesticide from here down there. They're sprayed on the plants, often by workers who are not using protective equipment of any kind, with physicians who know very little about pesticide poisoning. And then they're shipped back into the U.S. And the interesting thing is that the Department of Agriculture inspects food for the presence of pesticides, but not cut flowers, which can have up to 50 times the amount of pesticides that you'd see in crops. And little kids can take leaves and things and put them in their mouth, so they're getting exposed to this.
Why is it the workers are not protected? Why do they work under those conditions?
Well, it's desperate poverty, and it's taking advantage of sometimes indigenous communities and having the factory and the fields where the flowers are planted on indigenous people's lands that's taken away from them without meaningful compensation. Requires a huge amount of water, 120 liters of water just to produce a dozen roses. And what that does is it depletes the water table. It removes that area from agriculture that can be used to raise crops for local consumption. And women are very involved in agriculture, so it displaces many of them out of that traditional workforce into the factories, and they get exposed along with the men to the pesticides, which can lead to all sorts of problems, health-wise, respiratory problems.
So that's a cost.
Cancers. Oh yeah, the National Academy of Sciences has said that 1 million cancers will be caused in the current generation of Americans from exposure to pesticides.
100 million?
1 million.
1 million.
In the current generation of Americans from exposure to pesticides. That's pesticides on food, on flowers, on everything. But the World Health Organization has said that 10 million people die annually as a result of pesticide exposure. And the sad thing is the workers will come home and they'll take off their clothes and wash them in the same sink that's used to clean the baby, that's used to prepare the meal. The tarps from greenhouses will often be taken home to cover houses, so they're essentially living in what amounts to a hothouse with pesticides almost dripping from the ceiling. And so what I advise is I like to give flowers when I'm in love and happy, or just on Mother's Day and so on. But it's best to buy flowers that are sourced locally. There's minimal transportation costs involved. It's a huge contribution to global warming to fly the flowers from Colombia or Ecuador over to Miami, then over here to Portland. And so if you buy locally, you can go to Organic Bouquet. You can look at the Veriflora certification system, which is an international system that they're trying to get florists and supermarkets to adopt, that have certain requirements such as environmental sustainability and proper treatment of labor and so on. So there are ways to buy what I would call good flowers. But if you're just going to go buy a dozen roses at the supermarket, they're probably making that long trip to you.
But don't the corporations who own these companies make it convenient and make it very efficient for Americans to get the flowers they want? Don't they provide a service?
Well, they do, but so do local farmers that are growing flowers, and there are many just in California, just south of us. And do we really need to have a certain type of flower for a certain occasion? And much of that is a marketing construct, and we see that even more in diamonds. So I would say vary the types of flowers you're growing. Give flowers that you've grown yourself. Give potted plants, something that can be planted and ultimately make it into your backyard, that'll soak up carbon from the air and actually do something good for global warming rather than just end up in the trash can.
Are you a socialist?
Yeah,
I think you're a communist.
No, I'm not. I don't know what I am. I believe in a democratic government. I believe that the government ideally is us. It's a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I don't think in reality that plays out in the United States. I think a majority of members of Congress, for instance, are millionaires. I don't think that's representative of the U.S. at large. But that's the ideal.
So we can do something about the floral industry and have those people buy local stuff and deal with local people instead of supporting that industry that uses the people of those two countries,
right,
and abuses them and poisons them. But how do you get the people to change their behavior?
Well, hopefully this is a start, and they can also go to my website, read the article, look at the open access PowerPoint on this topic that they can share with appropriate citation with friends, relatives, Key Club, Rotary Club, whomever they wish to speak to. I think it's getting the word out. Boycotts could make a difference. There have been some of those in Europe. This Veriflora certification scheme is becoming increasingly popular, but it's putting pressure on the florists. It's asking the florists in the supermarkets, where did these flowers come from?
It's really starting that now.
And please help me pick something that is environmentally sustainable and is not damaging people's lives and displacing agriculture and contributing to hunger and so on.
So much for the floral industry and the cost through the floral
And of course the
industry.
main one is Dole, and we could go into Sanford Dole's history in Hawaii and imperialism and so on. Yeah, that's a whole other story.
That's 7 issues we're going to cover in some future show again. So, shall we go into diamonds or gold, or you want to talk some more about flowers?
No,
and that cost?
diamonds are fascinating, I think. Now, diamonds are just carbon. It was created early in the Earth's formation.
Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Well, yeah, and not necessarily, because of the human rights abuses, and often we're talking prostitution, rape, HIV transmission associated with diamond mining. So they're not necessarily really a girl's best friend, but it's just carbon. It's carbon created under high pressure and high temperature. And in fact, what's interesting, this is a quote from the chairman of De Beers, Nicky Oppenheimer, from about 15 years ago. Diamonds are intrinsically worthless, except for the deep psychological need they fulfill.
Well, psychological needs are important.
And they are, but there are some planets. There's one planet that they recently discovered, an exoplanet, that probably has a huge mile-thick layer of just diamonds. And of course, somebody's going to go to try to mine that, generations from now, which would mean the price of diamonds would plummet. But the diamond engagement ring came about in the 15th century. And De Beers started in 1866, and De Beers was started by Cecil Rhodes, Rhodes Scholarship, Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe.
South Africa.
And I'd like to read a quote from him. He's speaking about the colonies of Great Britain. "We must find new lands from which we can easily obtain raw materials and at the same time exploit the cheap slave labor that is available from those colonies. In turn, they would provide a dumping ground for our surplus goods produced in our factories." So this is the story of imperialism. And what happened is in 1939, De Beers hired N.W. Ayers and Company, which is a PR firm, to essentially make the diamond engagement ring a necessity and an absolute symbol of getting engaged and getting married and undying eternal love. And within just a few years, 80% of engagements were consecrated with a diamond engagement ring in this country.
What a marvelous coup.
It was the most successful ad campaign. The Diamond is Forever slogan, which was born soon after that, was voted by Advertising Age magazine as the most successful ad campaign of the 20th century. And it's basically, they also worked to convince jewelers, who would then pressure men, that you had to spend 2 months' salary to buy the diamond. But this is all, it's just a marketing construct. There's no need to consecrate an engagement with a diamond ring. It's pure marketing. And so
I'm so embarrassed because when I lost my other diamond stud, I was very worried, where am I going to find another one that's big enough to be impressive enough to say, oh, he's wearing a diamond. So even I am susceptible to that.
Well, Global Witness says that about 20% of diamonds in circulation worldwide are what's called conflict diamonds. But
conflict diamonds.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But in a survey just last year of the major jewelers, only 11% had a conflict diamond policy in place. And so, unfortunately, diamonds, because they're basically worth a lot of money in a very small substance, are used for funneling money for terrorism, including Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah. So you could really literally trace 9/11 to diamond rings and diamond money. Diamonds have also been used, or the desire for diamonds have fueled conflicts in sub-Saharan Africa, including in the so-called Democratic Republic of the Congo, Sierra Leone, where people were going around with machetes and hacking off limbs.
Has America been involved in any way of supporting
in a proxy
diamond
sense.
industry, as you're talking about Al-Qaeda and those people?
In a proxy sense, yes, through its support to some degree of the mining of the diamond industry. Now there is what's called the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme, which is an international agreement to trace diamonds back to their source with lock boxes and documentation and so on. And our Congress passed about a decade ago the U.S. Clean Diamonds Act, which says that we will adhere to that treaty. But unfortunately, the implementation has been rather slow. And we're talking a lot of lives. We're talking 3.8 million deaths over the last couple of decades in these countries, fueled by wars related to
Those are good
diamonds.
numbers, good research.
Well, it's very sad, and each of those represents a life. It's very easy, and this is the conflict between public health and medicine. When you're taking care of a patient, it's one patient in front of you. When you talk about numbers like this, public health, it's hard to get into the mindset and just think, my God, each one of these persons who died in these wars was a father, a mother, often a child soldier who had their future robbed from them. And so many people also are robbed in the sense that they live in what's known as a casino economy. And there's about 1 million diamond miners in Africa. And what that means is basically people are so desperately poor that they will go work in these mines because they think that they're going to find the diamond that's going to make them rich. and bring them out of poverty. So they'll leave their families, they'll leave their spouses or girlfriends, and it's usually men, although there is child labor and female labor. They'll go to the mines where there's prostitution camps set up around them, which are tacitly accepted by the companies, and there's a lot of HIV transmission and other STDs.
Well, there's not any other way that they can earn a living or feed themselves.
Yeah, and they're so desperately poor that they're hoping, I'm going to be the one who gets this, and it just doesn't happen.
And it's going on today.
Oh, it's going on as we speak. People are dying as we speak, and terror cells continue to be funded by diamonds as we speak. So I would say the alternative to diamonds, I suppose if you have to buy one and sort of adhere lemming-like to the way other people consecrate their engagements, I guess use some vintage jewelry if you have it, or try to buy conflict-free, but just displaying it. Yeah, you could get cubic zirconium, or you can. Some people actually have their corpses turned into diamonds as gifts to family members, and there's a whole pet jewelry market with diamonds. It's really rather disgusting when you get into all of it. But I would say just don't do it, because who's going to know if it's a family heirloom or one that you bought new? You're perpetuating this marketing construct.
Can you take a human body and convert it into a diamond?
Oh yeah, because we're made predominantly of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So you just high pressure, high temperature. I could. I
Don't go there.
But if you pass away from me, I could wear my Dr. Don diamond ring and have you as a constant reminder.
I'm quitting. Mr. Director, save me from this man.
Yeah.
So it's amazing.
It is. It's really disgusting when you get right down to it. And gold is so. Do you want to talk about gold?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, gold has an interesting history too, which is fascinating. So gold was first used in art back in about 4500 BC, and since about 1500 BC, it's been the predominant form of financial transactions planet-wide. Now we are sort of a dollar-based international economy, but that's backed up, of course, by gold and other precious metals.
Is that true anymore? With
to some degree.
People creating currencies, and
to
the
some
gold
degree,
standard's
there's
gone in
Bitcoin
America?
and the gold. We're off the gold standard, but there's lots of gold that still sits in banks, in federal banks. In fact, there's more gold just sitting in banks and financial institutions and in people's drawers than we know is actually in mines, and much of that is deliberately kept off the market as a price support to gold.
So it still has that power.
So absolutely, and the gold wedding band is a similar marketing construct. So if you buy a piece of gold jewelry, the price of that is going to, in general, run about 4 times the cost of the actual gold itself. And to make just one gold wedding band creates 18,000 tons of mining waste.
For one wedding band?
Yes.
What do you do with the waste?
Well, that's where the problem comes in, and it's the way that gold is extracted. It requires huge amounts of water, which is basically blasted at the walls of the mine. Then what's used is cyanide, which is used to leach. Cyanide is in the cellular poison that makes you stop breathing, to leach the gold out. And then mercury, which is neurotoxic and causes abnormal brain development, and there's also lead involved, which is also another neurotoxin. But mercury is used to create a gold amalgam. And so it's estimated that about 37% of the mercury that we're exposed to planet-wide comes from artisanal gold mining. And there's about 15 million people involved in artisanal gold mining. And it's a similar casino economy. But that mercury gets into the air, it's burned off, it makes it into the ocean, it works its way up to the food, through the food chain to the top predators, your tuna, your shark, your mackerel, and so on, and we eat it.
Artisanal gold mining. Say a few more words about that.
Yeah, it's basically small-scale gold mines, often involving 1 or 2, but sometimes 10 people, It's led to some severe problems, again, with agriculture. Much of this also occurs on places that are of high resource value to the planet, so near World Heritage sites or national parks. We see epidemics of lead and mercury poisoning in those who work in the mines and their families in nearby communities.
How come we don't hear more about what you're talking about now in the mainstream media?
Well, I think because the mainstream media doesn't do these sorts of investigations, plus they rely on jewelers for advertising revenue. So they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them.
So are we destroying ourselves?
We are, and really, it's many of us who are buying these products who are doing it. Mining in general is a very dangerous occupation. If you look at the full extent of mining, 40 people die daily in mine accidents. And you ask what happens to this waste. Well, it ends up in these giant tailings dams that are held up by earthen barriers which can break. And so there was a break in Guyana within the last couple decades that flooded a long stretch of the Omai River that was home to 23,000 people, and an even bigger break in Romania where the Baham gold mining toxic dam broke, flooding an area of the Danube River that is home to 2.5 million people. And so obviously effects on wildlife in that estuary, on the quality of the water. It's kind of like the West Virginia coal production facility leak, writ even larger. But it's in Romania. How often do you hear Romanian news or Guyanese news on the American television? You don't. I'm surprised because I go to other countries. I'll go to Australia and there'll be a lot of news about what's going on in the States, as well as practically every other country in the world. But you just don't, it's as if we sort of don't care, or we have this sort of sense of exceptionalism that if it affects us, it's important. If it doesn't, it's not as important.
So there's a CNN for domestic use, and then there's a CNN that's international, which will probably have more information about other parts of the world.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that. I know that the BBC does a little bit better of a job. The gold mines are also involved in terrorism, and in fact, Freeport-McMoRan, which runs the Grasberg mine in Indonesia, was basically using the Indonesian military to subject people to extrajudicial executions, to go after environmental activists. There has been evidence that Echo Bay Mines, which is another mining company that works in the Philippines, that Abu Sayyaf, which is the Al-Qaeda branch in the Philippines, has been getting money from that. So we're talking about mass destruction. I should also mention that malaria, which is probably the major infectious disease planet-wide, if you leave out things like the common cold, it's a very significant parasitic disease that kills 1 million people a year. Its transmission is facilitated by mining, both because of the mercury, which weakens the immune system, but also the clustering of people in small communities, the geographic movements as they go back and forth, carrying new strains. So that has the potential to come home to us here in the United States with climate change and the changing band in which malaria is seen and the nature of international travel and so on. So, I mean, we had malaria in the United States in the 19th century, but we got rid of it. But a lot of these infectious diseases now can travel worldwide within a day.
You mentioned terrorism a couple of times in our discussion about the result of these activities, terrorists being funded and being assisted in their terrorist activities. And I want to be sure that we know that it isn't other countries alone that can be terrorists or engage in terrorism. There's been some suggestion that America is the #1 terrorist nation in the world. How do you feel about that?
I think that's true. I think that we have a military that's much larger than the next 4 or 5 combined. This is not to show any disrespect for our troops in uniform.
Sure.
And they are out on the front lines fighting for the ideals on which this country was founded, which I strongly believe in. And
Yes.
I not only have great respect for their dedication to that, but I think that they're abused, particularly when they become vets and they don't get the benefits that they should. And I've spoken out on behalf of that many times. But I think, unfortunately, the people who are in charge have used the military throughout our history to further U.S. corporate interests. And you can see this in Central America. You can see this in the Middle East. And
I just wanted to be sure that we didn't just look at the accepted terrorist or terrorist organizations that are given to us by the media.
Absolutely, and there was a recent global poll, I think it was the Pew Charitable Trust, but I may be wrong, that asked people worldwide, which country is the greatest danger to peace worldwide? 24% said the United States, which was 4 times larger than anyone else who was listed. So the others that were down at between 4 and 6% were China, North Korea, Afghanistan. 24%.
We're getting away from the topic here, and we've only got about 7 minutes left total. So can we come back for the next 3 or 4 minutes and talk about flowers, diamonds, and gold, and how do I love thee?
Yeah, so what do you do? I would say, again, we talked about flowers and diamonds, what you could do.
Yeah.
Ditch the diamonds, I would say. Similarly on the gold, if you want, you can use heirloom gold that's passed along. You can pan for your own gold, which is kind of romantic notions that related to that. There is a campaign, the No Dirty Gold campaign, that you can take the pledge, and they've tried to get jewelers to sign on. And if you go to the PowerPoint on my website, you'll see the most recent data on which jewelers have committed to the No Dirty Gold pledge and which haven't. So patronize the appropriate jewelers. But I would say think of alternative gifts to express your love. Think of something that's lasting, that's unique between you and your partner. Think of something that's a gift not only to that person, but that's a gift to the planet. And particularly if you care about future generations, that's a gift to the future generations that you and your partner might raise, and to all of us. I mean, we are the only homonym species left, and humans are the #1 weapon of mass destruction on the planet. And we need to change that. We need to change our mindset, or we're going to ruin it for everything that lives on the planet, not to mention humans and future generations.
And someone suggested, some poet, that the ultimate gift from me to you is to give you myself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I would say is my love is in here and in here. And there are many ways to express that. And people can be inventive. Now, you can also buy gifts from stores that are selling indigenous works from the developing world, and the profits flow back and so on. I have some slides. I don't know if we have time.
Yes, we do.
I could run through these really quickly. Is there a way to put these up on the screen? So just quickly,
they're going up already.
yeah, you can just see in this greenhouse. It looks like an afternoon in Beijing. The amount of toxic air, and no respirator. Again, here, no protective equipment. Just barrels of pesticide waste outside of the living quarters for families. This is the Kimberley mine. It's a diamond mine in South Africa.
That's deep, isn't it?
Yeah, this yielded 3 tons of diamonds, but it was closed in 1914. And you can get an idea of the scale. Those are all skyscrapers and you know, 3 to 5 story buildings around it. This is the Minri diamond mine in Siberia. This is the largest open diamond mine in the world.
It's going straight down to the
Just
ground.
absolutely massive. Some of these pictures are from Sebastião Salgado, who's just a marvelous photographer whose work I admire. This is some artisanal, I believe, gold miners here. This is a victim of the diamond-fueled conflict in Sierra Leone.
Took the hands off.
Yeah. This is the myth of gold mining, you know, the old pioneer in the hat doing the panning for gold sort of thing. And this is the reality from Salgado. This is just a massive gold mining. All those things that look like ants are human beings. And we'll hone in a little more. I like this photo because it's almost as if this person is on the cross. suffering from the resource curse which afflicts these countries, which basically means that the countries that have these tremendous resources, the money all flows out of them, and having gold or diamonds in your country actually makes it more poor.
Yeah.
Here you can see there's military involved. It's just backbreaking labor and very difficult long days. Women are involved, even child laborers. And this is from Eugene Smith, another favorite photographer. This is Minamata disease from methylmercury toxicity, and this is also sort of referred to as the modern pietà of a mother taking care, bathing her Minamata disease, mercury poisoned child who was poisoned.
About 30 or 40 seconds more and let you have.
Yeah, I think we're done with slides, so we can take those off.
Well, what a presentation. Yeah, I really enjoyed what you did, and made me sad and angry, and sometimes I think I learned too much, but then I go back and I think about it. I didn't learn too much. I learned enough more to be more active and be more active in being what we're supposed to be about. Any thoughts or comments about what's happened so far in our time together?
No, you know, I always enjoy them, and again, I don't want to be seen as the guy who's down on love. I just think that love should be expressed in ways that make the world a better place. Yeah. And I don't think this is the way to do it, and I think we've all bought hook, line, and sinker into just incredibly successful marketing campaigns.
Yeah, okay. Looks like you better stop. And you got some public service announcements, and there we start right now. To watch my shows on the web, Google Don Bay on YouTube. There's many shows that interviews I've had, and you can watch what you want to there. And the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, without the ACLU, I think our civil liberties would be further down the tube than they really are. The first thing we've got to do is end corporate personhood. Go to www.movetoamend.org to see how you can end corporate personhood. And do we have anything else to say, Mr. E, Mr. Director? Thank you. Oh, the Alliance for Democracy is a wonderful organization where a bunch of activists work on social and political issues that affect all of us. And there is the website. And to watch the populist dialogues, go to that www.pdx.org. I'm running out of steam now. I gotta tell you to remember KFC and not Kentucky Fried Chicken. Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable. To you too, and you too, and you too. And thanks again for watching. See you next time. Take care.